that talk about metal held outside the country, the IRS is very clear on it. And they say that metal that is pooled is reportable, but metal that is segregated, directly held in a non-financial institution, forget that part for a moment, the non-financial institution. But they make a delineation between segregated and pooled. And if it's pooled, it's reportable, period. And so I think it boils down to title. Is the title in your name? Is it your specific asset in your name? And that's important to me. It's very relevant. And I think counterparty risk, systemic risk is something that will begin to become more prevalent when you see banks failing and the ramifications of it.
In today's news recap, China's strategic silver takeover, a calculated move to drain the West, China hoarding silver, price 10% higher than West. Secret weapon or economic warfare? While the world has been focused on the geopolitical tensions between China and the West, a more subtle battle has been unfolding in the markets. China, through a series of calculated moves, has been quietly accumulating vast quantities of gold and silver. This move has signaled a potential shift in the global economic landscape and highlights the developing countries' need for exorbitant amounts of resources. In addition to its gold hoarding, China has also been strategically increasing its silver reserves. The Shanghai Metals Exchange has seen a significant surge in silver trading volume, with prices consistently higher than those on Western exchanges. This suggests that China may be deliberately driving up the price of silver to drain the West's resources. The rising price of silver could have significant implications for Western economies, particularly those that rely heavily on industrial metals. If the price of silver continues to rise, it could increase production costs for a wide range of industries, from electronics to solar panels. This could lead to higher consumer prices and a further slowdown of economic growth as China outproduces the West in electronics and solar panels. Silver imports are notably increasing under Chinese President Xi Jinping, and most recently have spiked in June and July, with both months surpassing net imports of more than 400 tons. Last year at this time, the net importing of silver into China did not surpass 200 tons. U.S. President Joe Biden and his administration slammed China's trade practices in a memo released in May, claiming its over-manufacturing of solar equipment is harming the West. Now we'll show you the best clips of the latest interview, but first, smash the subscribe button, hit the like button, and turn on notifications so you do not miss out our daily recaps. Enjoy the episode.
But I guess you could say, in theory, that those metals held in an IRA would certainly be noticed by the powers that be in an event of some form of calamity. And we've talked about that before. In 2009, there was a bill that made it down to the House floor that was rejected, basically said if things ever got really bad again, that they could sequester, in essence, all the funds in the IRAs. It goes to show how fast things have grown, because there was $17 trillion debt then. Now it's double that. Over double that, and I guess there was roughly 17 trillion back then in IRA funds, and the theory was we take those funds, we put them into some form of an annuity, in essence, backed by U.S. Treasuries, guaranteed by the government. Now that was shot down, but the point is that if we try to delineate metals held in a vault, it's probably a few degrees less in terms of safety in an IRA. Because if you look at an IRA, you're not the owner of the asset, you are the beneficiary of it. The owner is actually the custodian. It's all semantics, but you can always take possession of the metal and liquidate it and say, give me my metal. But the point is, it's one layer removed of safety. If it's physically held in a vault, not at an IRA, segregated in a vault like a Brinks, which is a very large company with a big balance sheet and a great track record, excuse me, I think you have a much better chance. But here again, in a systemic world that we find ourselves in, the old statement of if you don't own it, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. While I'm not fully on board with that statement. There's a lot to be said for it. The removal of counterparty risk is huge, and owning physical precious metals gives you the ability to completely remove any and all counterparty risk and escape that type of concern, which I guess you could say is valid. Desperate governments do desperate things. It would be much easier for them to go after the IRAs and metal held within than it would be to go door to door or to enact broadly a confiscation the way Roosevelt did in 33, when in 33 it was currency, and now it just represents such a tiny portion of the assets that the American public owns. So it's valid, but I'm not worried about it in terms of segregated in your own possession, segregated accounts at a Brinks, not in an IRA. I don't think you have anything to worry about, at least at this point. Yeah, North Dakota is one of the only states, I believe, that has their own banking charter. So in essence, they're not, I guess you could say they have some level of separation from the Federal Reserve. To me, it's more along the lines of geographic. You know, most of the vaulting systems are along the eastern seaboard, Delaware, New York City. And you could argue that a place like North Dakota certainly is a good place to be geographically. But what it is more relevant is segregated storage. I had the owner of Delaware Depository. I went to lunch with him. He's a great guy. They run a beautiful facility. It's a COMEX facility. I have not one bad word to say about them. But he said to me, "Why don't you send me more IRA business?" I said, "Because you don't segregate IRA silver." He says, "That's right, we don't." And I just have a big problem with that. They segregate IRA gold. If you open up an account that's not an IRA, they'll segregate it for you. It's because the IRAs attract such a large percentage of volume for these custodians that in order to offer such a low rate, you see the depositories rather, they offer a very low storage rate to the IRA companies, way lower than they would if it weren't in an IRA. And if you were to open up an account at any of the depositories outside your IRA, the rates would be 3 times higher. And so they offer a really low rate, and therefore most of them pool it and allocate it. It's not that it's not safe anymore. It's just there's no title specifically to those items with your name on it. And I said, if you did that, I would send more business your way. But I have a personal aversion to that. And I have stories that I could tell about things that have happened with unallocated accounts. So, or allocated unsegregated, not segregated accounts, pooled accounts. And so bottom line is simply this, that it's very important, I think, if you are going to hold metal in a IRA, that it be completely and totally segregated. If you're going to hold it in any depository, it's completely and totally segregated. And yes, it may cost more money to do so, but I believe it's well worth spending the money. I'll give you another example. The Perth Mint certificate, completely and totally legit entity, but they offer 2 forms of certificates. One is free storage. It's not segregated. The other is segregated, and it's a 1%, I think, which is hefty cost. So most people choose the pooled, allocated. Now, that doesn't mean it's not safe, but there is something to be said for having title in your name of a specific product, specific coin, specific bars. To me, I would never touch anything that is not specifically segregated to you. And I think that's, in a world of systemic risk, in a world of over leverage, under capitalization, it's really important that title is clear and specific title is clear, who owns it. And so that's a non-starter for me. I would never, ever store my own funds in anything that is not completely and totally segregated.
The strategic importance of gold and silver is growing as countries, particularly in Asia, increase their reserves to strengthen financial stability. Andy Schectman, CEO of Miles Franklin, notes that this rising demand highlights the enduring value of these metals amid global economic uncertainties. Exchanges like the London Bullion Market Association, LBMA, and COMEX are seeing significant outflows as nations and large investors withdraw physical gold and silver. Schectman points out that this trend is tightening supplies and raising concerns about long-term availability. Schectman also warns that large financial institutions are manipulating prices through extensive positions in gold and silver derivatives. This creates discrepancies between paper markets and physical assets, leading to increased volatility. For investors, Schectman suggests that directly holding physical gold and silver offers a hedge against inflation and currency risks. As market distortions persist, securing tangible precious metals may be a wise strategy for preserving wealth. Now we'll show you the best clips of the latest interview, but first smash the subscribe button, hit the like button, and turn on notifications so you do not miss out our daily recaps.
Point, the folks that think they're trying to fight inflation are only fighting what is the consequence of inflation and rising prices. And when you look at Kamala's platform, she talks about giving $6,000 tax credit for families with a new child, or $25,000 down payment for 400,000 first-generation home buyers, or $10,000 tax credit for the first-time home buyers. Who pays for all that? We're already $35 trillion broke on top of unfunded liabilities. Where does that money come from? So in essence, at the same time she's, inflating through policy by creating money to fund these initiatives, and we can't afford them, then she turns around and blames the problem on the grocery stores for price gouging when it's the government that created the inflation to begin with. And inflation is always, every single time, a monetary event. It's an inflation of the money supply, an increase in the money supply. That is what causes inflation. And when we are creating, in essence, $100,000 a second, 24/7, or $1 trillion every 100 days, well, that's inflation. It's not the cause of the rise, or the rising prices aren't inflation. And we've been indoctrinated into believing the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, the CPI, from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, take the L out of that, and it just be the BS, is inflation. That's not. Rising prices are a symptom of inflation. It's the irresponsibility, fiscal policy, and brain dead monetary policy of the Fed and of the government that are creating these distortions to begin with. And it just goes to show how uninformed the public is, and certainly how uninformed someone like Kamala Harris is in saying this nonsense. I mean, just looking at it alone, just the cost of farmers to process, package, and deliver their food has gone up 31% since she's taken office as the vice president, and yet she's blaming it on grocery stores. I used to joke that this industry might be the only industry that makes less than the grocery stores, who make on average 1.5%. They're not the problem. The problem is through all of the inputs that have gone up in cost, fuel and seed and certainly fertilizer, most of which comes from Russia, and all of these input costs have gone up, and blaming it on and then trying to impose capping prices. You go back to the 70s and you read about that, you'll see that farmers had price caps on chicken, and the cost of raising baby chicks to the point where they could then, at a full-grown chicken and slaughter it and bring it to the grocery store, it cost more to do that. So they were drowning baby chicks, killing them, because the cost of raising them to adulthood and then bringing them to be processed cost more than they were allowed to sell them for. All that does is create empty food shelves and distortions, and people drop out of it. It's communism. It's socialism. Capitalism says a company that can do it more efficiently and do it better, well, they win. And if you can do something more efficient for less money, that is the whole concept of capitalism, bringing value through efficiency instead of imposing, the government's will. And all that does is distort everything that they trust. It's a bad omen that is a path that she is taking, rather than looking within and saying, geez, spending $100,000 a second 24/7 might be the real problem. Wasting our money all around the globe on initiatives we have no business being part of, or wars we have no business being part of. Well, maybe that's something we should look at. Instead, blaming the people who are running grocery stores at tiny margins. How about the margins we see on Wall Street? How about the margins we see other places? It's misdirected, and it's ignorant, and it's very troubling to me when you think about what could be if this administration takes power and starts implementing price controls like that. You'll end up with empty grocery stores and grocery store chains going out of business, and vilifying these people who are so crucial to everyone's life is just not the way to do it. Instead, look within, and that probably won't happen, but that's where the root problem is.
What do you think of Schectman's take? Is he correct? Will price manipulation end very soon for gold and silver as banks collapse, or will America be just fine? Post in the comments section down below your honest opinion and share with the stackers your plan. Now watch this video right here because it's a perfect fit for you. I'll see you on the other side.